Mr. Ashanti Alston has something he'd like to say. I asked him what he'd be talking about, and he said, I call it beyond nationalism, but not without it. Ashanti Alston was a Black Panther, a member of the Black Liberation Army, and is currently on the board of the Institute for Anarchist Studies. Well, without further ado, Ashanti Alston.
What motivates me more than anything else about anarchism and its relevance to Black revolution is that it has offered me some powerful insights into why we have not been able to recover from our defeat, the 60s revolution, and advance forward to the kinds of entities, organizations, and activities that make for invincible revolutionary movements. There are all kinds of nationalisms and there are all kinds of reactions to nationalism. I would like to address this issue from the perspective of someone who has moved through and grown within some of the Black nationalisms specific to the Black community. I would like to share what it means to me as it pertains to the questions you raised for this onward theme of anarchism and nationalism. We have been taught either to ignore our differences, or to view them as causes for separation and suspicion, rather than as forces for change. Without community there is no liberation, only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. But community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. Audre Lorde, great quote. I've taken it from the latest issue of Arsenal number 4, page 4, as it introduces its own discussion into the very same theme. As a Black anarchist tired of primarily white anarchists just totally dismissing nationalism, I truly appreciate Arsenal and Onward taking this on as two of the newest newspapers/mags on the scene. Black nationalism saved my life, in a sense, as a teenager in the 1960s. It jarred my unconscious acceptance of Americanism dogging my peoples, and helped me to see the larger picture. I am a 60s child. There was Malcolm, there was H. Rap Brown and Stockley Carmichael of the Black Power movement, and then there was the Black Panther Party. All were nationalists, all represent, also, an evolution of nationalism within the Black community. But because of the totally racist, genocidal dynamic within this Babylonian empire, the Black nationalist understood that we must primarily look to ourselves to free ourselves. Point blank. And none of these thinkers felt it was necessary to check in with the white man, from the ruler to the revolutionary, to see if it was okay. Picture that. It was about our survival as a people, not as that mythical working class or that equally mythical citizen. So, for me, as this teenager who had just witnessed the 60s rebellions in my own hometown, my own thoroughly racist hometown, nationalism was a lifesaver. We must love each other. Black is beautiful. We must control our own communities. Etc., etc. It's funny cause as an anarchist searching for some good anarchist shit from the 60s to be able to hold up and show proof that the anarchists were better on the position of nationalism than the Marxists and Leninists, I found hardly anything. I found some positive stuff from a libertarian publication, but to my surprise they represented the anarcho-capitulist tendency. Yet, I found them to be on point and consistent on respecting nationalism and national liberation, the libertarian forum of the late 60s and early 70s. Karl Hess, Joseph Hedden, and Murray N. Rothbard. They, at least, understood that Black people's nationalist struggle was a struggle against the state, the Babylonian state. They, also, looked at what the nationalist groups were doing in their actual grassroots practice, like creating concrete defenses against repression and alternatives in survival institutions. Thus, they liked what the Panthers were doing on the ground through their programs, and supported that kind of nationalism as being compatible with anarchism on the ground. Paul Goodman made similar observations of the early civil rights movement groups. But it was understood that these groups were dealing with issues of survival against genocide, and that these groups were developing their own analyses and programs to rally their communities. One last thing about the libertarians of LF, they interestingly enough were critical of the Panthers when the party turned towards Marxism and other authoritarian ideologies, because in their on-the-ground practice the survival programs were no longer spontaneous responses to specific oppressions, but increasingly had to be kept under the tight control of the party. Nationalism and statism are different in that nationalism can be anti-state. But they can have commonalities in that nationalism may only be against a particular kind of state, such as a racist state, or a fascist state. Anarchism and nationalism are similar, in that they are both anti-statist, but what does it mean when the specific anarchist movements within a specific country are racist and dismissive of any and all nationalism, be it reactionary or revolutionary? For me, even the nationalism of a Louis Farrakhan is about saving my people, though it is also thoroughly sexist, capitalist, homophobic and potentially fascist. Yet, it has played an important part in keeping a certain Black pride and resistance going. Their on-the-ground work is very important in keeping an anti-racist mentality going. As a Black anarchist, that's my issue to deal with 'cause these my folks. But it points to where anarchism and nationalism have differences, and that is in anarchists having no understanding of what it means to be black in this fucked up society. We do not have the luxury of being so intellectual about this excruciating boot on our collective neck, this modern-day middle passage into the prison-industrial complex, this, that. As a postmodernist anarchist, identity politics is important to me. Go back to Audre Lorde's quote. Every time I hear someone talk about my people, as if we are just some working class or proletariat, I want to get as far away from that person or group as possible, anarchist, Marxist, whatever. As a postmodernist anarchist, I also find my people's experience the font from which we will find our way to liberation and power. That's what I get from being the insurrection of subjugated knowledges. My nationalism gave me that kind of pride, because it was such a rejection of white thinking, or at least a decentering of the primacy of white thought, capitalist, socialist, whatever. I say this to say that folks outside of our experience need to respect that they ain't got no monopoly on revolutionary thinking, and damn sure ain't got none on revolutionary practice. It is easy to sit back and intellectualize about our nationalism from the modernist, Eurocentric framework of rational, scientific, materialist models. While one does it, it is our nationalism which constantly rally our people come together, remember our history, love ourselves, dream on and fight back. Black anarchists and anti-authoritarian revolutionaries understand the limitations of nationalism in terms of its historical sexism, hierarchy, or its modernist trappings in general. But we also recognize anarchism modernist trappings in the form of American racist privilege when it comes to people of color. The efforts of Lorenzo Camboa Irving, Greg Jackson and others, to build an organization/federation of black community partisans/organizers is an example of uniting black revolutionary nationalism and anarchism. I believe that Black Fist, even if called generally a people of color or third world anti-authoritarian organization, understood the necessity to be grounded in the experiences of black and brown communities. Thus, the experiences of the Panthers and the Brown Berets and other like groups were essential. The question seems to be whether white anarchists and anti-authoritarians can work with such groups. Even if those two groups no longer exist, their experiences are important. White folks need to deal with being anti-racist allies to folks of color communities and activists. Activists in particular, because we are usually white's entry point into any possible relationship with our communities. Anarchist theory and practice cannot take the form of a mere adherence to the Founding Fathers and canonical practices, such as Kropotkin, Bakunin, and the Spanish Civil War. Tired of hearing it? Anarchism here in Babylon must reflect our unique problems and possibilities for struggle. Our struggles are not just against capitalism. Too simple. Our struggles are not just against racism. That's also too simple. There's all kinds of negative isms we are fighting against, and just as importantly, all kinds of worlds we are fighting for. That's why I feel that the whole idea and practice of convergences and SPOCUS councils are so important to activists in general to learn from and enhance, because they are about making space for all voices to be heard and factored into the decision making, so that whatever activities comes forth from it prefigures the kind of new worlds we truly want. This rambles, right?
And not really.
My apologies.
No, it's cool.
I end this by advising white anarchists deal with being the best anti-racist allies you can. We need you, but we will do this shit without you. To my folks of color, come envision a world of worlds within our world, where there's principled coexistence within the wonderful diversity of the black community. Harlem/Spanish Harlem/Woods/hip-hop communities/villages of the Carolina Coast/college communities/gay lesbian transgender communities/Zulu Nation/New African/religious communities that come together mainly on Saturday or Sunday/squatter communities/outlaw communities. Kemetic communities/Iroganarian Sierra Leonean Ethiopian Rasta neighborhood/nomadic poet artist tribe/ and then those of us who just be plain ignorant and harmless and crazy, when we have to be, and fun-loving and like to journey through, and between communities and sometimes just create new mixed ones. What if, and how? Ella Baker said we can do it, if we can trust ourselves, and get away from leadership-led revolution. Kwesi Balagoon said we can do it, if we're willing to create a chaos that will shut this method down. Audre Lorde said we can do it, if we learn to love and respect our beautiful diversity, and reject the tools of our oppressors. Harriet Tubman Date ain't a better way to live than at war for a righteous Casu. And Frantz Fanon said if we smack that mother across the face, drive that pig out of your territory at the point of a gun is liberating for the soul. What if? Envision it how? Like Huey Newton's community of communities, beyond nationalism and fully self-determining, embracing our diversity of beliefs, lifestyles and non-exploitative economic arrangements, reuniting earth-loving peoples with a loving earth. Through the imagination, all is possible.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. Thanks, Ashanti Alston. I guess I had never thought of things that way. I'll have to go talk to my other white anarchist comrades about this. Hopefully they'll understand and have a little more respect for the autonomy of black and brown people to determine their own politics. Mr. Ashanti Alston,
Yes.
where would I go to find a transcript of everything you just said?
You could go to my website, anarchistpinner.net.
Do you have other political writings up there?
Yes.
Word.
Indeed.
Well, thanks again, Ashanti Alston, for talking to me today about how anarchists should respect the autonomy of oppressed people to determine their own politics. Even though we're opposed to the state, I guess we have a lot to learn from the revolutionary nationalist struggles that came before us.